And let's go out to Lions camp, where we find our Evan Washburn alongside Rick Spielman. Evan, I mentioned it there. Dan Campbell's side coming off the division title. They were one win away from playing in their first ever Super Bowl. You've both been covering the NFL and in the NFL for a long time. Is there a different feeling, a different confidence, sense of expectation amongst this Lions team as they go into this season?
Jeremy, it's all of those things, and in a lot of ways that's as big a challenge as what they'll face on the field, Rick, because managing expectations, realizing that you can't just re-rack what you did a year ago, even if you do bring back roster continuity, staff continuity. And I think that's what's going to be interesting over the course of today, visiting with this team, but really over the next few weeks and early into the season, how Dan Campbell and the staff really handles all of those challenges. And I think Dan's gotten ahead of it pretty quickly by saying they're not going to lose their identity. And he's experienced it as a player and as a coach, where teams have had success and then there's been a regression because there's an expectation, oh, we can just do what we did last year. You know this as well as anyone, what's required in these situations, probably more so off the field than on, to try and recapture that success.
Yeah, they went from trying to be the hunters, now they're going to be the hunted. And the success they had last year. But what I was really impressed with is when Dan Campbell, as a head coach, he's not going to let anything go by. It's back like they're just starting over again. And they got to this NFC Championship game. They were up 24-7 at halftime before they end up losing that. But I think that made this team even hungrier. And you just seen what they were able to do this offseason on attacking some of the needs that they had to fill.
No doubt. And Jeremy, I will say, too, I'm of the mind, and I'm sure Rick has an opinion on this as well, scars do matter, though. So what happened a year ago, well, it doesn't necessarily bring you back to that same spot. It's part of the build back.
And the Lions, you kind of alluded to it, they locked up their core on offense. Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell all signed new deals. Offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, one of the most sought-after head coach candidates, but decided to stay with Dan Campbell. With all of that coming back, what is the outlook for the offense this season?
Well, Rick, I would say the offense outlook is pretty strong because of that continuity. And while it's true you have to build back from the ground floor, the shorthand that this group now has when it comes to Jared Goff and his coordinator and play caller and Ben Johnson, but just everyone, the ability to get through install quicker, the ability to add to the playbook in a different way because you're not having to bring so many new pieces back together and teach them what it is you want to do schematically. So I think that puts them in a great position. And this is a group that I think can do so many things well and really lean on what many, and I think I would agree, is the best offensive line in football.
Yeah, and that's where it starts, up front on that offensive line. And they lost Jonah Jackson in free agency. They brought in Kevin Zeitler from Baltimore. They just extended Taylor Decker, too, the left tackle. So as long as they can stay healthy up front, and with the skill guys that Brad Holmes has drafted, with Gibbs and Laporta and everybody that they have on the offensive side of the ball, if they can stay healthy, I don't know if there's a better offense in the league right now.
Yeah, and Rick, the name that I'm curious to hear more about today and then watch as training camp unfolds, but really early in the season, is Jameson Williams. This is a big year for him to add an important layer to this offense.
All right, so that's the offensive side. On the defensive side, DJ Reader joins the D-line. Marcus Davenport joins Aiden Hutchinson in terms of Russians. Carlton Davis joins the defensive backfield. They got draft picks in Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw back there as well. So on the other side of the ball, what's the outlook for this defense this season, guys?
Well, I think it's a different story, Rick, in a lot of ways, because this is where there is some new, especially when you look in that secondary. They were intentional and really targeted a way to improve that group's explosiveness, physicality, however you want to view it. It's a competition in that back end for what ends up being 2 to 3 spots. And that's where I think eyes need to be, again, in training camp early this season. Does Aaron Glenn have some more pieces to work with and really employ his style of defense?
Yeah, I thought Brad Holmes and what they did trading for Carlton Davis, drafting Terrion Arnold, getting Ennis Rakestraw here, they had to rebuild that secondary. And last year they were really good in run defense, but they struggled against the pass. They struggled in red zone, and they also struggled struggle getting pressure on a quarterback consistently, so they go out and sign Marcus Davenport, who has all this potential, just hasn't been able to stay healthy through his career so far. So I think with the pieces they added, and you throw in Brian Branch from last year and Campbell, who they drafted, they're building the defensive side like they built the offensive side. Now, when you have this much talent on a defense, at least in theory on paper, and these guys can do multiple things, maybe play a little bit more man coverage, that'll give them the flexibility, and Aaron Glenn the flexibility to do more pressure packages to get to the quarterback.
Jeremy, a lot of excitement here. I couldn't ask for a better day to be alongside Rick. This weather, I think the ad campaign is pure Michigan. It feels like pure Michigan today, so we're excited for what should be a pretty intense practice as they get back on the field for the first time since preseason game number 1.
Yeah, Evan Washburn, Rick Spielman joining us from Lions camp as they, as you mentioned, coming off that first preseason game, that preseason loss. There's a lot to work on as they get set to take on the Kansas City Chiefs next week. Our guys getting set for practice today. We're going to hear from them after practice as well later in the day here on HQ, so you want to stay tuned for that. We talked about the odds to win the NFC North. The Lions are the favorites. They are the defending kings of the North. Plus 130 the odds for them, and of course they are one of the top 5 favorites for the Super Bowl as well. We're one game away from that last year, sitting at 12-1. And we'll hear more from our guys later today here on HQ.